Story time of how my neighbors were killed and we all heard. I live in a middle to low class neighborhood in the Caribbean. It's a quiet place where nothing happens. It's the type of place that people go to retire and sip pina coladas all day. However, a few houses next to mine lived a family that was not like the rest. They had the biggest house on the street and lived luxuriously. Their kids would play with me, especially the smallest girl we nicknamed Tiny. Tiny was my best friend and she was always at my house. On Tiny's birthday, her parents threw a giant party for her and all of the neighborhood kids were invited. They had bouncy houses, water slides, and everything a kid would want to play with, but my parents wouldn't let me go. I never knew why. I suppose it was because my mom didn't know her mom. After the birthday, things went back to normal, and one day we were all playing and talking about what our parents did for work. We asked Tiny and her siblings, but none of them knew what they did except that their dad traveled a lot and was always at meetings. I didn't pay much attention and we all continued on with our day. One night, we were playing on the street when we started hearing loud pops and screams coming from Tiny's house. I will never forget that day. The neighbors, including my mom, came out rushing us inside yelling that it was gunshots. She locked us inside the house and I couldn't believe what happened next. Part 2 of how my neighbors were killed and we all heard. After hearing gunshots, we stayed locked in my house while the next door neighbor, who was a cop, ran towards Tiny's place. Then we saw a black man rushing down the street trying to get away. Tiny and her siblings wanted to check what was going on, but everyone forbade them to go. All I remember was a bunch of cops and ambulances a few minutes later, and after that day, I never saw Tiny or her siblings again. For a couple months, the house sat empty, but black vans and strange men kept coming into the neighborhood. They went door to door asking for any information about the man and his children. No one in the neighborhood spoke about it, and as years passed, the story faded away. Now that I'm grown up, I asked my neighbor, the cop, what went down that night. He said that night, Tiny's dad got a gun emptied in his skull and his wife was gravely wounded, but she survived. Apparently, he was a drug lord that was going to make a deal with the police to turn in rival gangs and some other people to the cops. The men in the van that were going door to door wanted to know where his kids and wife were to also shut them up. Tiny's oldest brother was found dead in a neighboring town, his car set ablaze. Tiny and her siblings are now living in other countries under witness protection programs. I just hope wherever she is, she's doing okay and her family got the help that they needed. Story time about how my friend scheduled her wedding on the day of my family's death anniversary. 7 years ago, I lost my husband, daughter, and mother to a car accident. They were hit by a drunk driver that drove through a red light and killed all of them on impact. Their deaths greatly affected me. If it weren't for my friends and years of therapy, I would be in a much lower place. I'm thankful for their support and have been able to process my grief properly. 2 years ago, I took a better paying job and moved to a different city. It's a 7-hour drive, but I travel back occasionally to visit friends and of course my family's graves on their death anniversary. My friend Amy announced that she was engaged last year to her boyfriend of 3 months. My friend group and I were shocked because we never met him or knew that she was even dating anyone. Nonetheless, we were happy for her. They postponed the wedding due to COVID, but now the cases in my country are less than 10 and she's having it. Last week, Amy called me to tell me that she scheduled her wedding on the same day as my family's death anniversary. She asked me not to visit their graves and attend her wedding instead. I asked her why she picked that date and she told me that she wanted to and I can't gatekeep a date. Then I asked her why I can't visit their graves and she said it's because she doesn't want my sadness and grief to take the attention away from her wedding. When I told her I wouldn't miss visiting my family's graves, things got complicated. Part 2 of how my friend scheduled her wedding on my family's death anniversary. I tried to compromise with Amy and tell her that I'd attend my family's graves after her wedding. She said she wanted my support for the entire day and dedicated towards her, but she'd think about my offer. She was there for me when they passed and I'm torn, but I refused to miss going to their graves. I called my other friends to let them know what Amy asked of me. They were livid for me as they had no idea what Amy was planning for the wedding. We arranged a Zoom call and discussed why she was being so insensitive towards me. It started off calm, then Amy just blew up. At first, she tried to explain that having a wedding on the same day would turn a negative situation into a positive one. When she realized it wasn't convincing enough, it felt as though a mask had fallen from her face and she started yelling and insulting me. She said she's tired of having to play the supportive friend role and that it's been 7 years, so I should just get over it by now or go join my family in the ground. My friends lost their anger and called her every name in the book. It hurt to have lost another person in my life, but in a sense, she never really was a good friend. None of her friends are going to the wedding now and have all blocked her on social media. My friends offered to go visit my family's grave with me and I accepted. We're planning to also make a scrapbook with my family's pictures in it. For once, I'm actually looking forward to this day. Crime Fanatic Friday, The Boy in the Box. The year was 1957 and it was a cold and dewy morning in Philadelphia. A man was poking around a portion of road that was used as a dumping ground for garbage. He poked something that he originally thought was a doll packed away in a bassinet box. He was so convinced it was a doll that he didn't call the police. However, the next day, a news report broadcasted a missing 4-year-old girl. This is when he questioned himself about the doll he saw and decided to call it in. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found wrapped in a flannel blanket was the nude, badly injured body of a little boy. Police estimated the boy to be between 4 to 6 years old with a full set of baby teeth. His cause of death was severe trauma to the head, but his body showed signs of years of abuse. He was malnourished, covered in bruises, had a scar under his chin, and surgical scars on his ankle and groin. The police were confident that this case would be solved quickly. However, days turned into weeks and no one came forward to identify the body. Hundreds of recruits scoured the woods looking for any clues. The paper distributed over 200,000 flyers. The child was unidentified for years to come. That is until 1998, when a segment of America's Most Wanted led to a spike in interest in the case. His body was exhumed for a DNA sample. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, The Boy in the Box. Sadly, the DNA and dental testing was a bust. Several people came forward with information relating to the case, but police weren't able to verify any testimonies. However, a few theories have been introduced over the years. In 2002, a psychiatrist called in about the case with a promising lead on behalf of a woman named Martha. During a 3-hour interview, Martha talked about her childhood. She told police her mother had purchased the boy in 1954 from his biological parents. The mother physically and sexually abused Martha and the boy. One day, the boy fell sick in the bathtub and the mother became enraged, beating him to death. She wrapped the boy in a blanket, put him in the car, and took Martha with her to dispose of him. However, Martha suffered from serious mental health issues, and this made her an unreliable witness. An investigator who wasn't giving up on the case sought the help of a psychic in New Jersey. This psychic stated that the boy came from a house in Philadelphia, which she described in great detail, despite never having been there. The house was less than 2 miles down the road from where the boy was found. It was a foster home ran by a couple who had over 20 foster children. They had a bassinet that they bought from an auction like the one that the boy was discovered in, as well as blankets similar to the one that the boy was wrapped in. After countless interviews, nothing concrete was found. To this day, the case is still unsolved. Storytime about how I was saved by drag queens. My friend and I had made plans to meet up over the weekend to grab a drink. When I showed up, my friend texted me last minute bailing due to a family emergency. Since I was already downtown, I decided to grab a drink by myself. I take myself out on dates all the time, so I didn't think it was a big deal. While I was walking to the bar, this guy approached me and asked what I was up to for the night. I told him what happened, and he invited me to hang out with him and his friends. I made it clear to him that I wasn't looking for anything other than friendship, and he quickly replied that he respects it. With this, I felt more comfortable and started hanging out with him and his friend group, which was a mix of guys and girls. We all made our way to the bar and started drinking. That's when I befriended another group of people. I introduced both groups to each other and everything seemed to be going great. A few people from the new group came up to me and asked me how long I've known the guy for. I told them that I just met him an hour ago. They gave me a funny look and told me that he's been talking about me like we've known each other forever and are dating. I was a little creeped out, but I thought that maybe he was just drunk. That's when they said he's also been going around the bar talking to random guys about selling me. This is when my heart dropped and I started to panic. I was terrified because I was alone, drunk, and felt like this man had something terrible in store for me. Part 2 of how I was saved by drag queens. When the people from the new group told me that this guy was talking to them about selling me, I was shocked. I stood there for a minute in disbelief as I racked my brain thinking of what to do. I was too drunk to drive home and I was paranoid of everyone around me at this point. When he wasn't paying attention, I slowly made my way out of the bar. I bolted it to my car and decided that I would sleep it off until I sobered up. When I was a few feet away from my car, I hear footsteps running behind me. I glanced back to see the guy from the bar running towards me. Panic jolted through me and I quickly unlocked my car door. I jumped in and locked the doors behind me. He tried to open the door and then started pounding on my driver's side window, threatening me. A few minutes passed, but he wasn't letting up. Suddenly, someone pushes him to the ground and I look up to see that it's a group of drag queens. I thought I was seeing things for a second, but they tell him that they saw everything and if he gets near me again, they're going to rearrange that ugly mug. He stumbles to his feet and sprints off. I think they could tell that I was shaken up because they invite me to come to their show at the bar nearby to calm down. They spent the next couple hours with me as I watched each one perform and made sure that I got home safe by the end of the night. I'll always be thankful to them. Story time about how a guy I hooked up with posted me on an explicit website. In the summer of 2018, I was a senior in high school and worked at a bike rental shop. I was always kind to the customers but also careful not to be too friendly. One day, it was a few minutes before closing when this group of college guys came into the shop to rent out some bikes for the week. I gladly helped them with the rental and got all the bikes ready. As I was sizing them up and chatting, all the guys were being really friendly and telling me about all their fun plans. I finished getting their bikes ready, and before they left, they asked me for my Snapchat. I never gave out my personal information to customers, but I let it slide because these guys were so fine. I started talking to them on Snap over the next few days, and one of them caught my eye. His name was Tom and we just clicked. He was easy to talk to and he would even come by the shop to say hi every now and then. We were flirting with each other a lot and he finally asked me to hang out with him. During our first hangout, he invited me back to the rental house where all of them were staying for the week. I spent the night and we hooked up. The next morning I left and throughout the week we kept messaging each other like normal. Things seemed to be going great until I woke up one morning and saw a heart-dropping text from Tom. Part 2 of how a guy I hooked up with posted me on an explicit website. When I woke up in the morning, I saw a text from Tom. When I read it, my heart dropped and I felt like I was going to pass out. In his text, he said, "Thanks for the content," followed by a link to an explicit website. When we hooked up, he asked if he could record it. I was into that kind of thing, so I agreed but made sure to tell him I didn't want anyone else to see it. When I clicked the link, I saw that he had posted the video on this website and it was already racking up views. I was mortified. I tried to text him and the other guys, but they had already blocked me. To make matters worse, the following week, everyone at my high school found out about the video. I don't know how they got a hold of it, but I'm guessing someone came across it and recognized me. The whole school was sharing it and talking about it, and I was so embarrassed. Then I was called into the principal's office along with the guidance counselor and my parents. I ended up getting my phone taken away for a month, followed by my boss giving me a lecture about why we don't give out personal information to our customers. We contacted the police, but we never heard back from them and it ended up being a dead end. Even though my parents were furious, they were still understanding. Thankfully, we were able to get the video taken down. I never heard from Tom or those guys again.